Are we live now?
It's just loading. Yeah, you can start.
All right. Good evening and a warm welcome to one and all present here. I am Raj Barcha, PCGT Campus Ambassador at HR College of Commerce and Economics. The Public Concern for Governance Trust was founded by late Mr. P.G. Deshmukh, former Cabinet Secretary to the Government of India, Mr. Julio Ribeiro, former Mumbai Police Commissioner and Director General of Punjab Police, and Dr. R.K. Anand, pediatrician, former Director of Jaslok Hospital, in order to strive for good governance in the city of Mumbai. PCGT has initiated the Youth for Governance program to sensitize youth on issues of governance and to develop leadership skills, especially in public activities. It provides a platform for youth to collectively question, discuss, and initiate action on related issues. Youth for Governance program aims at changing the students' perspective towards ethical conduct in whatever profession they finally opt for, government or private sector. YFG has various programs like RTI program, PCGT dialogues, and good governance campaigns that mobilize youth and promote issues of governance, sexual harassments, eve teasing, and emerging social concerns for contemporary world. The PCGT dialogues are followed with series of interactive sessions with eminent personalities and with great social conscience. Youth for Governance program helps to build students' perspective towards ethical conduct and responsible citizenship. Press is considered to be fourth pillar of democracy only until now, where majority of the mainstream media has lost its spine and has diverted ways from truthful journalism. The era of WhatsApp University has made it easier to spread hatred and fake news. To address this issue, we have with us a speaker for the day, Mr. Siddharth Varadarajan. Mr. Siddharth Varadarajan is a journalist and senior fellow at the Center for Public Affairs and Critical Theory, New Delhi. He was, until October 13th, the editor of The Hindu, an economist by training. He studied at the London School of Economics and Columbia University and taught at New York University before returning to India to work as a journalist. He has been a visiting lecturer at the Journalism School at the University of California, Berkeley, at Pointer Fellow and a Pointer Fellow at Yale University. In the year 2015, Mr. Varadarajan, along with Mr. Siddharth Bhatia and M.K. Venu, founded the non-profit online news portal called The Wire. He continues as a founder editor there. I'd like to call upon Professor Rahul Mishra to address the students.
Well, thank you, Raj. And on behalf of, first of all, let me take the opportunity to welcome our speaker for today, Mr. Siddharth, along with Mr. Julie Rebello, who's also joined us, uh, and also Mr. Ren, with whose efforts we are able to have this a very important session today to understand the role of journalism in the democracy. My dear friends, as Raj clearly stated, that today's time we've got a lot of information and the source of information has become very much easier with reference to Facebook or WhatsApp, and it's very much circulated. And people do tend to share this information or whatever you can say, the data, blindly or without any kind of check on that. And based on that, people are making their forming their opinions. So in this time, this in this particular age of digital era, or you can say Industry 4.0, where everything is fingertips, it's very much important that what we read is correct and what we understand after reading that also it has to be correct, because there's something called as you understand what you read, and for that you should have a right input. And for that, I think the journalism plays a very much important role in delivering the right thing to the people. So I believe that this is as we all are aware, this is a fourth pillar of the economy, and we should all know that because of the right journalism only, we can uphold the democracy. So, not taking much of your time, I once again, on behalf of HR College, on behalf of HSNC University, and on behalf of HSC Board, I welcome you all, and I'd like to Raj to take ahead the event and call a speaker to address the audience. Raj can take further.
Thank you, sir. So before we jump into the session, we have with us Mr. Julio Ribeiro. Uh, Mr. Julio Ribeiro is one of the founder members of PCGT and is also the chairman of PCGT. He joined the Indian Police Service and rose to be the Commissioner of Mumbai Police. Later, he was promoted as the Director General of the CRPF, the Director General of Police of Gujarat, Director General of Punjab Police, and Ambassador to Romania. In 1987, he was awarded with Padma Bhushan, India's third highest civil award. After retirement, he has busied himself in social work. Mr. Ribeiro has also titled his autobiography, Bullet for Bullet, My Life as a Police Officer. Welcome, Mr. Ribeiro. I'd like you to address the students.
Sir, you're
I
not
also,
audible.
pardon?
So yeah, audible. Yeah, audible now. Yeah.
We have all come to hear Mr. Siddharth Vardarajan, and that is what everybody is waiting for. I'll only say that PCGT has been facilitating the presence of very good speakers and people who know the subject so well, and your students must know the subject well. You know, journalism today has a very important role to play in our country, just like the judiciary has. I also worked as a journalist for 2 years before I joined the Indian Police Service. When I was preparing for the exams, I was in in the National Standard, which was the name of the paper before it became Indian Express. And I remember discussing with our news editor, and he used to always tell me, look, journalists are supposed to keep a great tag on what the government is doing because it has too much power. Power is given to it, and that power should never be misused. This is what the journalists are supposed to do. Unfortunately, this is not happening today. Uh, there are many journalists who keep a very strong watch and then bring out things to the public. Today we have had the farmers' agitation, and it was I was watching it on the television, and I great difficulty I left it because I wanted to hear my friend Siddharth, and I think that we should all now listen to him because he is one of those journalists along with his two friends Siddharth Bhatia and Venu, who have really brought that principle that the government should be held accountable to the knowledge of the public, and it is doing a great service to the nation. I uh, I give back the mic to you because I think you should give the floor to Siddharth Vardarajan. Thank you.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you. So without further ado, I would like to call upon our guest speaker, Mr. Siddharth Vadarajan. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Raj. Should I take about half an hour, 40 minutes?
Yeah.
Because in my experience, these kinds of sessions work best when we leave some time for question and answers. So, well, it's a great honor and a pleasure to take part in this program organized by the Public Concern for Governance Trust and HR College, Bombay. Both are excellent institutions. And when Mr. Ribeiro approached me with the possibility of giving a talk on the subject of the role of journalism in democracy, I jumped at the opportunity because this is a very, very crucial subject of our times. And who better than the current audience for me to be able to share my views and also to understand from them their concerns and for us to exchange views. So without any further ado, let me launch into the remarks that I prepared. And I will speak for about half an hour to 40 minutes, and then be happy to take your questions. A little bit about my background. I have been a journalist now for more than 25, 26 years, a full-time journalist. I used to freelance earlier for Frontline when I was teaching economics at New York University, and joined the Times of India in 1995. I worked there for 9 years, then worked at the Hindu for 9 years until 2013. I left that newspaper as its editor, and a year and a half later founded The Wire along with my colleagues Siddharth Bhatia, Bombay, and M.K. Venu in Delhi. And The Wire will next May turn 6. And I think that what we have accomplished and what we are trying to do through The Wire is something vital, not just for Indian democracy and Indian journalism, but I dare say also for Indian democracy, because the two domains, as the title you've given me suggests, are really very, very closely linked. And it's my view that journalism is that essential element which ensures democracies function the way they are meant to. And I say this because we are living through a period today when, barring a few countries, China, Saudi Arabia, which do not have even the pretense of a democratic structure, we are living today, apart from those countries, we are living in a world where virtually every country has, and certainly all of those that are more economically successful, have as a structure, as a political structure, some kind of democratic system. And these are all democratic systems fashioned to suit the historical and social circumstances of those particular countries. And the structures of democracy, they may differ. So what you see in the United States is very different from what you see in India, or what you see even in the UK. India modeled its system on that of the UK, but there are vital differences in the way the two function. But essentially, all of these systems, what they have in common is an intricate set of checks and balances that ensure the fact that the individuals who are elected as representatives of the people through universal adult franchise exercise their power in a responsible way, in a legal way, in a constitutional manner. And that at no point in time do they subvert the will or the interests of the people, or the law of the land, or the constitutional principles on which these political systems have been created, right? So every country which is democratic has devised a set of structures, and the fundamental division that's common to many of these countries is a separation of power between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And the idea is that in particular, the judiciary must function as an entity that is independent of the executive branch in particular, so that it can, if you will, function as an arbitrator, as and when disputes arise that involve the executive branch, and the fact that it is independent is meant to ensure that the decisions that the judiciary takes will be unbiased and objective, but more importantly, will carry will be legitimate enough to carry the wider public behind whatever decisions are taken, right? So you have universal adult franchise, which creates an elected government, and the elected government typically would function through a legislature. Even if you have a presidential system, like you have in the United States, the president of the US wields an enormous amount of power, but many of his decisions, his appointments, for example, his key cabinet posts require legislative backing, right? So his other than his national security advisor, every other top cabinet post of the US president has to be cleared has to clear the hurdle of Senate confirmation. And other countries have different checks and balances. In India, we have a more orthodox parliamentary system where the prime minister is supposed to be the leader of the largest party and enjoy majority support in parliament, and is meant to function through a cabinet system. So the first check itself comes in when the prime minister is meant to carry his cabinet or her cabinet along with him or her, and decisions of the cabinet, particularly when they frame or when they decide to draft laws, have to then clear parliament. Oftentimes, and in India, this has been the tradition in the past, but has been abandoned of late. Parliament itself, before it would consider acts, before it would consider legislations, may deem it necessary and proper to subject these laws or these issues to more detailed scrutiny by standing committees, by select committees of parliament, which are organized on the basis of ministries and departments. So there are, and then of course you have deliberations in parliament, you have discussions when a law has to be passed. And even then, when a law is passed, the law may be rammed through parliament on the basis of a parliamentary majority. But in the Indian system, at least, those laws would have to pass or would be vulnerable to a challenge on the test of constitutionality. And of course, we know after the famous Supreme Court judgment in 1972 that the basic structure doctrine is key. Any law that is passed, even so laws that, particularly laws that amend the constitution, but I dare say other laws too, if they involve policies which end up violating the constitution, can be challenged, can be struck down. So these are some of the more direct forms of checks and balances that's emerged from the division of powers in any democracy. In addition, many countries they create layers of accountability and layers of autonomy, even broadly within the executive branch. So, for example, the government of India's finances have to be audited by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. You have other, there is the Election Commission of India, which is supposed to function independently of the government of the day. You have other agencies that, even though they are all peopled by or staffed by government appointees, the Central Bureau of Investigation, for example, or the Reserve Bank of India, have a mandate to conduct criminal investigations or monetary policy or banking regulation in a way that is insulated from day-to-day political interference. That's the theory. And certainly every government would insist that they respect that idea that investigations or banking policies, for example, are conducted independent of political interference. But the reality is, of course, something else. And let me just go off my phone. These are the other kind of checks and balances. In India, we have additional layers that through custom, for example, universities are governed by vice chancellors who are, of course, appointed by the government, but once they are appointed, they have a tenure. Ordinarily, they're not removed, and they are free to develop their own university policies under the guidelines of the University Grants Commission. But the idea is also that the University Grants Commission would regulate universities in a way that is free from political interference. And there are lots of other agencies, institutions, bodies that whose job it is to ensure that governance takes place in a professional manner, in a way that the executive or ministers or government bureaucrats do not interfere, and certainly do not allow political considerations to color decisions of one kind or the other, right? So that's the theory. And all of this structure is backstopped, or is meant to be backstopped, by an independent judiciary, which is is meant to pass judgment as and when violations of basic governance norms or violations of law, violations of constitutional principles come to light. Right? So that's the in the Indian system, that is the structure, so in other words, democracy is so much more than simply universal adult franchise, because universal adult franchise is a necessary condition for democracy, but it's not sufficient. And it brings a government into place, but how that government operates, how it remains confined, all its operations are legal and constitutional. The founding fathers and mothers of the Indian state were careful to write into the constitution an intricate set of rules, norms, regulations that they hoped would keep the executive on the straight and narrow, and ensure that Indian democracy was democracy not just in form, in terms of elections every 5 years, but also in terms of content. Now, what happens when these checks and balances fail? And they can fail for a number of reasons. They could fail because of lack of information, maybe. Perhaps the judiciary is not made aware of certain violations of law, violations of norms, violations of principles by executive authorities at the center or in different states. It's possible that there could be lack of complete information, which prevents different agencies of the state, which are meant to be independent or meant to be autonomous, from doing their job properly. But more often than not, these systems of checks and balances fail because of lack of intent. Because those individuals who are placed in charge of countervailing institutions, or institutions that are meant to place checks and balances, lack the will or the intent or the desire to actually play their constitutionally mandated role. Why does that happen? More often than not, it happens because the individuals who are selected for these positions owe their selection, not to put too fine a point on this, to the choices made by the executive. And here you can see, even in a much more well-developed democracy like the United States, the authority that the president has to choose a Supreme Court judge, for example, is enormous. And we saw Donald Trump, even in the dying days of his first term, when Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, he rushed to fill that vacancy with a judge that he felt would be in tune not just with his political philosophy, and that's been a long-standing practice, that presidents pick judges who they feel would reflect their own political ideologies or their own political biases. But more importantly, Trump, perhaps, and this was written quite openly in the American press, that he was choosing a judge in the expectation that were the election to really go down to the wire, and were the matter to come up before the Supreme Court, he would hope that the judge that he picked would rule in his favor, right? So to a large extent, a lot of the failings that we see in institutions that are meant to operate as checks and balances stem from the fact that the process of selection is such that these individuals are beholden in some way or the other to the executive branch, and thus do not play the constitutionally mandated role that they are meant to play. And I'll give you a small example. We know, for example, we know that over the years, a system has evolved that the head of the CBI and the head of the Central Vigilance Commission, are chosen by. Earlier, they used to be chosen by the government, but because there was mounting evidence over the years that the CBI and the CVC is the prime anti-corruption watchdog within government. So there was growing awareness of the fact that governments were packing these jobs with their own nominees. So the system arose that let's have some kind of a collegium comprising the Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition, and the Chief Justice of India, who would make a selection, or who would finally pick who would be the head of CBI, who would be head of the Central Vigilance Commission, in the hope that when you broad-base this selection mechanism, you're less likely to have a candidate who would be beholden to the central government of the day, right? But we don't have the system for something so crucial as the choice of election commissioners. So the choice of election commissioners, and of course the chief election commissioner, such a crucial set of appointments, because they run elections in India and they get to adjudicate on complaints about the lack of fairness in the way in which elections are conducted. The government of the day has full say over who will be appointed as election commissioners and as the CEC. And one consequence of this we saw in the last election, 2019, when the Election Commission refused to rule in a timely fashion on complaints that a TV channel called Namo TV, which was essentially created by the Bharatiya Janata Party, which is the ruling party, to promote its political propaganda in a way that would circumvent the model code of conduct for electronic political broadcasts during election season. So the BJP violated that and by setting up a channel, and the Election Commission never ruled in time about the fact that that this Namo TV was a violation of the election rules. Similarly, when the Prime Minister made communal remarks, the EC refused to even entertain complaints that were made to it for weeks at end. And only when the Supreme Court gave them an ultimatum and said, look, why are you not adjudicating on these complaints, did the EC then rush to so-called adjudicate on these complaints and, of course, give a clean sheet to the Prime Minister. So who peoples or who staffs these institutions becomes very crucial in determining the extent to which the constitutionally mandated watchdogs are able to deliver on their role as promised or not, right? And the same applies, more or less, I would argue, when it comes to the judiciary, which is meant to be the ultimate guarantor of Indian democracy, because judges of the Supreme Court in particular have enormous power to rule on government decisions. And in principle, the selection of judges has been left to the collegium, which comprises judges themselves. Yet we've seen the government finding ways to browbeat the judiciary, and essentially try to get verdicts that it wants. Whenever cases come up before the Supreme Court, and this has weakened the role of the Supreme Court as a watchdog. An observation that's not something that I'm making by myself, but which retired judges have also made with a great amount of dismay, right? So to come back to the main topic of the day, democracy is not just about voting, it's about all the other structures that ensure that the government which is elected on the basis of a popular mandate actually functions in a constitutional and legal manner. And you have all these other institutions which are meant to guarantee that the government operates in that fashion. And when these institutions fail to deliver, either because of lack of information or more likely because of lack of intent, you have a crisis of democracy. Democracy then no longer functions or delivers what it is meant to deliver. And this is where the role of the media is absolutely crucial, because all of you have heard references to the idea of the media as a fourth estate, implying that if you have the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary as three branches or three estates, the media is the fourth estate, which is meant to, in a way, again, guarantee the robustness of democracy. And never has this been, ordinarily this, you may not need a fourth estate, but when the existing estates do not function in a way that they are meant to, particularly when the judiciary lets people down, this is where the role of the media becomes absolutely crucial, because it's up to journalists, it's up to and media platforms to essentially highlight failures, violations, failures of governance, violations of law, violations of constitutional principle, denial of rights of people, and by shining a light on the way in which the system functions in practice, we can at least goad the different branches of government into taking action of one kind or the other. And I'll give you a small example of the kind of victory. I can't. It's too premature to call it a victory, but you may have seen the news last night or today of Gautam Navlakha, one of the accused in the Bhima Koregaon case, who has been in jail now for several months. And he, I won't go into the veracity of the charges against him, but he is close to 70 years old and with failing eyesight, and his glasses were stolen in jail. And he asked his partner to send him a new pair. And something so basic, right? You would think this is an essential part of the rights of a prisoner. No matter what the charge is against you, you have the right to wear glasses that you can see. And when a new pair of spectacles was sent by Speed Post, the jail authorities callously refused to accept it and sent it back. And when we highlighted this in the media, the jail, we gather that the jail superintendent got a little embarrassed and has now issued instructions that the spectacles can be sent and they will be given to him. Now, there's no reason why, if Indian democracy functioned the way that it ought to, that Navlakha would have been denied his spectacles in the first place. Or even if he was denied these spectacles, there would have been adequate checks and balances within the system for that right to be wronged. Right? This is a very small example. There are lots of other more horrendous examples. The manner in which migrant workers were forced to leave Delhi, Bombay, Surat, and other cities when the lockdown was announced, and not given any help for days at end, until the media highlighted the issue and forced the government and forced the Supreme Court to act. And even then, what they did was not adequate. And the government got away with lying in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court did nothing about that. So the point is that, it's the media then that upon whom the burden of ensuring Indian democracy functions the way it's meant to falls. And never has this role been more important and crucial for the country than it has been at the current time. Because if you review the past 70 years, there have been times when the judiciary has performed better or worse than, in some years or some eras, it's done better than it has in other eras. In some eras, Parliament works very effectively and parliamentary committees work very effectively. In some eras, you've had a strong election commissioner, you've had a strong CAG, you've had titans who have headed universities and who've defended the autonomy of the education system and the freedom of thought that is so central to good education and the idea of university. But never have we had a moment like the present when the judiciary, the university system, the Election Commission, the CAG, the CBI, the RBI, the Censor Board, you name it, every institution that was devised, that was created in order to ensure Indian democracy works properly. We never had a time when all of these institutions are functioning at a below par level, at a subpar level. And I'm being charitable and kind here, and being careful in my use of words. But we are today in a situation where Parliament doesn't meet, citing the pandemic as an excuse. But even when Parliament met, hardly any time is devoted to debates and discussions on crucial bills. Important pieces of legislation that ought to have been referred to standing committees so that those issues are thrashed out, and all the, like you look at the Farmers' Bill, for example, right? Today, it's becoming apparent that none of the concerns of millions of farmers across India were ever addressed in because there was no debate in Parliament. There was hardly any discussion. And the way in which the bills were passed in the Rajya Sabha through what I regard as a kind of illegal voice vote was a scandal. And today you are, in a sense, paying the price for it as government, because you can use brute majority, and the fact that the speaker or the chairman of the Rajya Sabha, decides not to follow proper rules or proper custom and customary, the usual parliamentary practice, but you can't shut the people of India up and get them to accept whatever you say. And I think here the fact that farmers are protesting and demanding dialogue, demanding that laws which affect their lives should be debated and discussed anew. They should be reviewed carefully. This is something that has happened, I dare say, despite the best efforts of the media to ensure that this discussion and this deliberation does not happen. Because, as I said, you have a situation where the bulk of your constitutional agencies and institutions are not functioning, and the task or the job really fell on the shoulders of the media to protect Indian democracy. But even here, a large section of the media abandoned its responsibility and chose to function simply as government stenographers, passing on what the government's views as their own, or as objective, legitimate views, or as shall I say, duly certified, facts. And when people protested, and the suggestion was made by people close to the government that these are anti-nationals, that they are secessionists, that they are Khalistanis, a section of the media willfully and obligingly jumped in order to malign the people who are protesting. And if, despite all of these obstacles, the farmers of Punjab and Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan and every other state have managed to get their voices heard, it's a tribute to their power of organizing and their unwillingness to be dictated to, that we are, it's a tribute to their power rather than to anything that the media may have done. I mean, I'm not saying that they weren't, or that there aren't voices like ours or others who have been trying to highlight objectively what the farm laws are about and to speak to people about their concerns. But by and large, the media has tended not to report and cover this objectively. And this brings me to a key part of what I wanted to say, what I wanted to discuss, which is that if we accept that the media is that essential element which allows democracy which ensures democracies functions the way that they're meant to. And if we see today that the media is not playing that role, what are some of the reasons for that? Why is it that, as I think Raj or the professor from HR College who introduced me said, why is it that the big media in India is not discharging its responsibility in the way that it's meant to, particularly at this time when its role is absolutely crucial and every other institution has abandoned its mandate. And I think here I want to focus on some of the constraints that the media operate under, so that you can have a better understanding of why the media does what it does. And let me start by saying that on paper, in terms of, and just like the Indian Constitution guarantees, or on paper the Indian Constitution looks like it created the perfect democratic system, but in reality we know that things are very different. Similarly, on paper, the Indian media has full freedom, notwithstanding the restrictions that come with Article 19, restrictions on free speech. The way that these restrictions have been interpreted over the years have not really come in the way of the media doing its job. So on paper, in terms of constitutional guarantees, India is one of those countries that has a free press. But the reality is that if you look at the Reporters Sans Frontières report or other international reports on India's ranking in media freedom indices, India does pretty badly. And the trajectory, the graph, the Indian performance is slipping year by year. I think this year we slipped 2 positions on the back of 2 or 3 years of bad performance. And the fact is that whatever rights we enjoy on paper, in practice, the Indian media, does not operate in the particular free environment. And I want to just spend a few minutes to discuss what are some of those things.
I'm sorry, you're not audible.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Now we can, yeah.
Okay. I wanted to spend a few minutes to just explain what are some of those constraints, and I'll start very quickly with the legal ones. As I said, on paper, India has the Indian press is a free press. It's freedom of the press is guaranteed by the Constitution indirectly through the guarantee of free speech. In reality, the police and the authorities, both at the central and state levels, have a lot of legal leeway to lean on individual journalists and editors.
Sir, you're not audible.
Sorry, but your voice is not clear.
I think it is showing green.
So I guess there was something on your mic, like some cover or something, because otherwise your voice is clear, but in between, like something.
Okay, is it good now?
Yeah. Now it's perfect.
All right. So legal, as I said, the police and the authorities have lots of legal means to harass and intimidate journalists, and they use these means at various points in time, particularly in times when the government fears being criticized or when it fears that its shortcomings are going to be highlighted. And we saw this during the weeks and months following the imposition of the lockdown this year, when cases were filed against reporters and editors for simply doing their job, for highlighting shortages, for highlighting corruption, for highlighting.
So sorry to interrupt you, sir, but then your voice is again not audible.
Can you bring it closer to me? Testing.
As Ashray said, there's something on your mic which is.
But I'm using a laptop, so I don't know where the mic is here. Even.
Oh,
So
okay.
I think your hand must be covering the mic.
Yeah.
Hands are here.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
I'll keep them up. And so, in Tamil Nadu, in Andaman Nicobar, in Himachal Pradesh, in Gujarat, in Uttar Pradesh, state after state, the police arrested and filed cases against reporters on all kinds of frivolous charges, essentially for reporting uncomfortable facts about maladministration and poor governance. In the case of Gujarat, you had an editor of a digital website who was actually charged with sedition because he wrote a piece saying that Gujarat's handling of COVID was so bad that the BJP was thinking of replacing Vijay Rupani as chief minister. Now, how on earth could this be sedition? I can understand Mr. Rupani being unhappy with that news story. And as it turned out, that news story was wrong. But the remedy doesn't lie in filing a sedition case. And I can give you many, many other examples. And I think that, these examples have highlighted the vulnerability. I'm not saying that every year scores of journalists are arrested or prosecuted. But what we saw this year is an illustration of the kind of risk that being a journalist in India entails. You have the law of defamation. When I was editor of the Hindu until 2013, I left the Hindu. I was editor for 2 years, and I collected 3 criminal defamation cases filed by the then Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, Jayalalitha, simply for the Hindu having reported what the opposition said about what a bad chief minister she was, and other similar kind of basically journalistic work, and these cases amount to harassment. As a founding editor of The Wire, we've had lots of defamation cases filed against us, criminal and civil. At one time, before the Adanis withdrew their cases against us, we were facing something like 14 defamation cases. The Adanis have withdrawn, so now we are facing 8, 2 of which are from the Anil Ambani group, and they're demanding damages worth 10,000 crore from us, all for objective, factual reporting. And this is a form of pressure and intimidation that is exercised by politicians, by powerful corporate houses. So I would say that the legal constraint. Now, as a nonprofit, but even if we were not a nonprofit, as a media portal that is funded primarily by readers, so we don't have investors to worry about. We are quite capable of weathering the kind of threats that defamation cases carry. But most conventional media houses, because they are owned by risk-averse businessmen or investors, would prefer not to be in a situation where cases are filed against them. And so the signal goes from day one that if you're doing a so-called risky story, and a risky story is defined as a story that would that a politician or a big business house may not like, then perhaps it's better not to do that story, right? So this legal constraint is the first is one big reason why the Indian media doesn't perform the role that it ought to perform, particularly at a time like this when our democracy is under siege. Second reason is financial. The fact is that the media is a business. There are very definite expenses that are involved in covering the news, and revenues very rarely cover the costs that you incur, particularly revenues that are derived from readers. So I would say if you look at the average newspaper, something like 90% of its revenue comes from advertising, not from the cover price. And this places media houses in a place of dependence on advertisers. And when the advertiser is the government, as you can imagine is the case with small newspapers, and even in the case of some big papers, the fact that the government advertises and the fact that the government can withdraw its advertising. And we know that state governments like West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Chhattisgarh, Jammu Kashmir, they've all used advertising in local papers as a lever to act against critical coverage and to help those media houses that are loyal to them. But this is also happening at the central level. The Hindu, which ran a series of stories against the Modi government's handling of the Rafale aircraft purchase, found itself removed from the pool of central government advertising put out by DAVP. And there are lots of other examples. So the financial pressure is there. I should also add that there is political pressure. By political pressure, I mean that politicians, whether at the state or the central level, frequently lean on owners and editors to not carry certain stories or to spin a certain story in a particular direction. And these requests or these instructions usually take the form of a request, but the person who receives these requests knows that there would be a price to pay if you don't accede to them. And that price could take the form of an income tax raid or an enforcement directorate raid or the CBI knocking on your door at midnight on the basis of some frivolous complaint. Or, if you are one of those media houses that has lots of other business interests, then you could find that all of a sudden your trucking business or your mining business or some other business that you run is running into all kinds of legal and administrative hurdles, right? So there is very clear political pressure that is brought to bear on media houses to ensure compliance with government desires of how the news should be covered. Then the fourth constraint, I would say, is an internal constraint, or to use a different phrase, the media acting against itself. And this is something that we've seen. This is a very recent phenomenon where broad sections of the media, maybe because they are financed by the government or because they depend on government advertising, I don't know quite what the reason is, but large sections of the media have simply decided that they don't particularly care for journalism and journalistic ethics and standards, and have converted journalism, which is universally understood as the objective reporting of facts and the questioning of those in authority. These media platforms have converted this into the partisan rendering of information and the questioning of those who are outside of government. So the toughest questions are reserved for the opposition or for critics of the government, while the government itself is given an easy ride on issue after issue. And sure enough, the government knows, how things work. So somebody like, say, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, who has emerged as one of the government spokespersons during the farmers' protest, is available for interviews to a channel like Times Now or Republic TV, but he would not. I know that my friend Karan Thapar has put in several requests to him and to lots of other BJP ministers for interviews, but they will never agree to be interviewed by him because they know that the kind of questions that he will ask will put them on the spot. And of course, the Prime Minister never holds a press conference. He hasn't held a press conference in 6 years. And even the interviews that he's given have all been very carefully selected and screened. Often you have the impression that questions are submitted in advance. In fact, once, I forget who was the channel interviewing him, but the viewers were meant to believe that this was some kind of spontaneous interview. And he was asked, कि प्रधानमंत्री जी आप कविताएं भी लिखते हैं, तो आप अपना कविता सुना दीजिए. And Modi, the camera caught Modi holding a piece of paper where the question was also written. And of course, he had a poem ready. And I'm not going to comment on the quality of the poem, but it's very clear that many of these interviews are scripted. And, essentially, we've never had this in India in this blatant a fashion, that a whole section of the media has crossed over to the dark side and sees its job as serving as a mouthpiece of the government. Right? In the bad old days, we had Doordarshan, or you had All India Radio, which served as the official mouthpiece. Even that was illegitimate because these are public broadcasters paid for by the the taxes of citizens, and should not simply be used for government propaganda. But that's the way it is the world around. But in India, apart from these official broadcasters, you have private official broadcasters who have taken it upon themselves to serve as the government's mouthpiece, and regrettably have also become vehicles for the communal anti-Muslim propaganda, anti-minority propaganda of the government and the ruling party. This is something that we didn't have in the past, and I would say that's why I identify this as an internal constraint in the media. Here, nobody is forcing, nobody is compelling Republic TV or Times Now to push a certain story or push a certain line. This is coming from within. And I would say that this is a case of the media acting against itself. The final constraint, and I'll end on this, is and it's I would say not quite a constraint, but it's a mixed blessing, is the role of social media. I think the professor from HR College spoke about the surfeit, or the excess of information, and it is true. One of the problems with the digital age is the excess of information, the ease and high velocity of information flows, unverified information. People have the ability, and not just you and me or individuals, but you can have vested interests, you can have political parties who are trying to push a certain political agenda. They are quite, social media and private messenger tools like WhatsApp give them the ability to seed information, fake information, and to package it as news, and have it circulate, at a scale unimaginable in the past. So in Tsarist times, or in Europe at the turn of the 19th and 20th, at the end of the 19th century, you had a fabricated document called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was probably drafted by the Tsarist authorities in Russia, and was a lurid pamphlet maligning the Jews and accusing them of trying to pollute Christian women, trying to seduce Christian women, and sacrificing Christian babies, all kinds of nonsense. And this became material that was circulated in the form of pamphlets, and was quite central in the promotion of anti-Semitic propaganda in Europe in the early part of the 20th century. And we know the horrific consequences of that kind of propaganda, not just in Tsarist Russia, where you had pogroms. The word pogrom, in fact, comes from Russia, from Tsarist pre-revolutionary Russia, when Jews were massacred by the Black Hundreds, and who were a kind of paramilitary, pro-government paramilitary force. But then during the time of the Nazis, how anti-Jewish propaganda was used and circulated. And what we have today is a situation where, the propaganda of Tsarist times was confined to pamphlets that had to be printed or cyclostyled. The Nazis had access to newspapers and the radio. And I've just finished reading a book on the use of the radio by Nazi Germany in promoting its propaganda. But the fascists of today have access to WhatsApp, they have access to Twitter, Facebook, all kinds of methods of communication that can spread poison to literally millions of people. And in the case of WhatsApp, do so kind of below the radar, right? If somebody publishes communal propaganda on a website or on Twitter or Facebook, you can at least see and complain. I mean, Facebook may not act, right? We remember the scandal from a few weeks ago when the Wall Street Journal wrote about how Facebook refused to withdraw some of these anti-Muslim posts by BJP leaders because they didn't want to spoil his relationship with the BJP. And since then, of course, Facebook says, no, we're going to make amends, and the lady in question left the organization. But then just the other day, although Twitter is not the same as Facebook, but Twitter suspended the account not of communal propagandists, and there are hundreds, if not thousands of them. I myself have flagged a few of those people who are advocating violence, but no action is taken against them. But a respected writer, historian and writer and commentator like Salil Tripathi, who simply recited a poem on the anniversary of the demolition of the Babri Masjid, found his Twitter account suspended. And so you have social media, but my point is that those are public platforms. We don't even know what is being circulated on WhatsApp. Occasionally, you may come across a forward, right? An uncle in your housing society, or an aunt, or maybe a family member may share something ridiculous with you, and then you say, "Look, mom, look, aunt, this is not true," and so on and so forth. But the fact is that the fascists of today have access to this kind of technology, which also creates a burden for the media, because people then don't know what to believe. And so when you get information that comes unfiltered, unverified from WhatsApp, and then you also have news items, it's very easy for the government to say, well, don't believe this, don't believe that, this is fake news. So news that is critical of the government, that shows the government in bad light, the government is very quick to label fake news. Trump used to do this often in America, but the government does it here too. I remember we ran a story during the lockdown of how Muslim Gujjar milkmen in Punjab were actually threatened and beaten up in I think it was, I forget the district name now, not Kapurthala, but in one of the districts, and Hoshiarpur maybe. And the Hoshiarpur police was very quick to label this as fake news and say that no such incident happened. And when we later confirmed and reconfirmed and put up audiovisual evidence of the fact that our story was correct, then of course the government had to admit it. But their first instinct is to label objective, independent reporting as fake, while promoting their own propaganda below the radar through WhatsApp and all kinds of other means. And this becomes a huge burden or challenge for us. I don't want to leave you with the idea that social media is a negative thing. It's not. I mean, a small platform like The Wire has been able to grow and achieve a tremendous amount of influence because our stories are accessible to millions of people through Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp. But these platforms and social media channels are a kind of double-edged sword, and that the enemies of media freedom, the enemies of democracy, the purveyors of hate, also use these platforms and channels, and perhaps are sometimes more skilled at gaming them and using them in a kind of in a clever fashion than those of us who are legitimate journalists are able to do. So I'll leave you with those thoughts and just close on the note that I began with, that democracy is so much more than voting. But in order to ensure the essence of democracy and the essence of rule of law, particularly when institutions that are meant to serve as checks and balances don't operate, the role of the media is crucial. And if the media were to walk away or to stop playing its role, I dare say that would be the time when democracy loses its last line of defense. And we at The Wire and others like us in other newspapers, portals, television channels who are fighting the good fight are determined to stand our ground and to not be cowed down or intimidated by legal or political or financial pressures, or to be seduced by blandishments of one kind or the other. We are determined to stand our ground, and we are confident that by doing so, we are helping to strengthen Indian democracy at a time when the entire edifice is being eaten and destroyed from within. So with those words, I will stop and be happy to take your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I've got a few questions. Those of you who are willing to ask questions may put it in the chat box and I shall read it to the speaker. So the first question is, the media houses that are run from outside India, how do you feel will they do justice to our democracy?
You see, the thing with digital media is that it doesn't respect geographical boundaries. So in the era of when newspapers were the main source of news, a newspaper is physically printed in India and physically distributed. So it's quite easy for governments to say, okay, we won't allow a foreign newspaper to come. But I think that in the digital era, this idea that you can somehow stop foreign media platforms from writing about you is really a case of tilting at windmills. You can't stop it. And to think that you can stop it is first of all, to insult the intelligence of the Indian citizen and to say that she does not know how to differentiate between what is good news and what's not. But secondly, it also presupposes, it's I think based on a kind of erroneous assumption that media which is owned and operated from within India is always going to be objective and honest and pro-country, whereas media that is coming from abroad is somehow going to be anti-country. That's simply not the case. I named some channels to you, and I'll name them again: Republic TV, Times Now. These are fully owned Indian entities, but the kind of journalism they do is a daily assault on the interests of the Indian people. But this is happening from within it. I'm not saying they should be banned. I'm not saying that that you can ban them or that, but I'm saying that the idea that because they're Indian, somehow they're legitimate, and that if the New York Times runs a story, or if Al Jazeera runs a story, or the Guardian runs a story on India, that somehow this is illegitimate because it's owned by a foreign publication or written by a foreigner. This premise is completely wrong. So I would say that you should worry less about foreign versus Indian, because you can't do anything about it, right? YouTube, Google, Yahoo, these are all foreign entities. And Facebook is foreign. And so even the thought that the government of India could somehow try to regulate these, it's really a crazy idea. And the more the government tries to go down that route, the greater is the likelihood that they will start doing openly dictatorial measures like the Chinese have done, because the Chinese physically block. So if you're sitting in China, you cannot read the Wall Street Journal. If you type that URL, it'll come blocked. And you would have to use a VPN, but I'm sure as students, all of you guys know how to circumvent, when your ISP doesn't let you access a certain website. But obviously the bulk of citizens don't know that. So I think that anyway, this is a futile debate of Indian versus foreign in this digital era.
Thank you, sir. So what do you think about the changes that the media, is making? I mean, the influence on the youth, influence of media on the youth.
Influence of the media on the youth?
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, in the sense that I think young people, I think the way young people consume news is very different from the way that people of my generation consume it. I don't think young people read newspapers as much as we do or we used to. And you're getting a lot of your, I don't think you watch as much TV as the generation before you used to. People are spending more time on the phone, on their mobile devices, and accessing news through social media links on Instagram, for example. Maybe even Facebook is not popular anymore, and Instagram is the place where people go. So I think that I don't the media. I think young people are as susceptible to misinformation as older people, and maybe different kinds of misinformation. But I think that the young people need to have their eyes and ears open. They need to verify, cross-check information that comes to them, so that you are not unduly influenced by something that is wrong, something that is factually incorrect. And as long as people are able to develop, young people are able to develop their own internal filters for processing information, I think the harmful effects of fake news and so on can be kept at bay.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, what are your views on censorship of OTT platforms and digital media recently put by INB Ministry?
So, what the INB Ministry has done is probably a precursor step. They have brought OTT platforms and digital news under their purview, but are yet to propose regulation or censorship of content. I'm pretty certain that they will go down that direction and try to censor OTT platform. I think it's fundamentally wrong for a number of reasons. First of all, technological, because content that comes in through the internet can come from a variety of sources. And so you may insist that Netflix or Amazon abide by Indian censorship laws or whatever the censor board, which is the most retrogressive, one of the most retrogressive organizations in India. You can insist that they abide by that. But how do you prevent other digital platforms from serving content and Indians accessing those? Nothing prevents you from, like tomorrow, let's say Disney, or let's say Warner Brothers uploads all of its movies on its website and says you can watch its entire backlist for free simply by going to warnerbrothers.com. Is the government going to insist that warnerbrothers.com's content, entire content meant for a global audience, has to conform to Indian censorship laws? I mean, it's ridiculous, right? So the government should not try to control and regulate things that it really cannot do. And the same goes for digital content. Like, what is the logic of insisting that the Wire.in, which is an Indian media entity, has to abide by some set of rules and guidelines which the INB Ministry may come up with, when NewYorkTimes.com, which is accessible to Indian readers in exactly the same way as the Wire.in is, does not have to conform to those guidelines. And tomorrow, what is to prevent NewYorkTimes.com from creating a website for Indians, India.NewYorkTimes.com, serviced and uploaded entirely from the US, but written by Indians who are in India, who work as employees? Is the government then going to say that no Indian can write for a foreign platform? So what I want you to understand is that the technology is such that the only way for the government to, once the government goes down this path, it can only succeed by curtailing the democratic rights and civil liberties of ordinary citizens. And that's a very, very dangerous path to go down.
Thank you, sir. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. Why the Supreme Court doesn't interfere and try to stop such malpractices of biased and bad news?
That's a good question. I myself have mixed feelings about encouraging the Supreme Court to interfere and intervene. I think when content is inflammatory and when it incites violence, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hello? Okay. When content is
So sorry to interrupt, but I think we lost the connection.
There's some network issue, I think so. It's freezed on the screen.
Hello.
1 second, I'll just.
Yeah. Unlock the meeting.
Yeah.
He's in the meeting. He has not left.
Yeah, he is not connected to audio. Guys, if you have more questions, just put it on the chat to send it to Raj Barcha.
He's there in the meeting, I suppose, but it's not connected to audio.
he might be facing some connection issues.
Meanwhile, any questions are there, please post to Raj Barcha. He can take those questions.
Okay, he has
Yeah.
joined again.
Yeah.
The speaker is here with us.
Hi, sorry, my connection was severed briefly. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I was saying that I have a problem with when content is inflammatory or incites violence, then yes, there may be a need for the courts to step in, because you can't have people, just like I don't want people on the street to be shouting kill so and so, or or abusing other people and so on and so forth. Nobody should do that from a media platform either. But I would say the bar is pretty high. Like if you're actually inciting hatred, then yes, the law and the courts should act. The danger in saying that the court should act against irresponsible or bad or unethical programming is that the boundaries for how these are to be defined and policed become very problematic. So what you regard as biased or unethical may not be the same as what a judge regards as biased and unethical. And given the power equations in society, the more you equip the authorities with the ability, and I mean not just the executive but also the judiciary, the more you equip them with the ability to stop a program or to censor, the greater is the likelihood that it might be used against media programming that the government doesn't like. So I would say yes, the courts should take cognizance of hate speech and programming that encourages hate speech. But we should be careful not to open the door too much to this kind of intervention.
Thank you, sir. So what do you feel upon imposition of UAPA, sedition, and defamation charges, in a country where people enjoy the right, the freedom to freedom of speech and freedom to press?
You see, defamation, civil defamation exists in every country, right? And so if you are defamed, then you ought to have the right to clear your name. But there should be guidelines to ensuring that this is not abused. And in India, civil defamation is abused. There's no two ways about it. Most democratic countries have done away with criminal defamation, except India. And I think it's time that India ended criminal defamation, not just for journalists, but for everybody. Because criminal defamation is certainly misused by politicians and powerful people to harass journalists. UAPA, in my view, is a terrible law that does not help India in its fight against terror, but essentially allows the government to lock up critics, dissidents, as we've seen in the case of the Bhima Koregaon, but I'm not going to, that becomes an entirely different topic. But I want to draw your attention to the arrest under UAPA of Siddique Kappan, who was a Malayali journalist who was on his way to Hathras. And it's been now nearly a month since his arrest. And the police, the information and material that the police has made available to sustain their charge is so utterly ridiculous. For example, they allege that he is a member of the PFI, Popular Front of India. But the PFI is not banned under the UAPA. So the PFI is not banned under UAPA. What is the point of mentioning that he's a member of it, even if we accept that he's a member of it? And lots of other similar, foolish statements that were made in the Uttar Pradesh government's affidavit vis-a-vis Siddique Kapan. And similarly, we've seen UAPA FIRs being filed against journalists in Kashmir. This is a terrible new trend. And the government is doing it because it knows that once somebody goes into prison under UAPA, getting bail is very, very difficult. So it serves the purpose of censorship, of preventive detention, of intimidation. And the government doesn't care that, okay, after 3 years or 4 years, they either drop the charges or they're unable to file a charge sheet or you are acquitted. But at least for that time, they end up intimidating lots of people and making sure that the message goes out that if you criticize the government, you can very much end up in jail.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so this is an interesting question. Working with The Wire, did you ever get a direct offer to portray a particular government as good or bad?
No. See, people know what The Wire is, and they know what the founding editors and our team of colleagues are made of. So, generally, neither threats nor offers of this kind come our way, because they would basically achieve nothing. In fact, the fear would be that if they were to make such a threat or an offer, we would probably end up writing about it and showing them in bad light. So the answer is no, we haven't got such things.
Okay, thank you. And we have one final question. So how do we check the legitimacy of the news now that the majority of the media houses are run by corporate or Democrats? I mean, bureaucrats.
I would say that not just media information, but I think as readers, you people have a responsibility to cultivate a keen sense of skepticism. So when you see a bit of information, particularly information that looks a little bit tendentious, you should always ask yourself, okay, what is the source of this information? So I think for you as a reader, it should no longer be enough that Times of India or NDTV or The Wire has reported something. We should read the story and say, okay, what is, like if The Wire says XYZ has happened, on what basis are we saying this? Who are we quoting? Is there a quote? Is there a link? What happens when you click on that link? So on and so forth. I think that you have to develop a natural reflex before you forward a story or before you share it, even though the headline looks catchy to you and the headline or the premise of the story goes along with your own particular political, views or biases. I think you owe it to yourself to satisfy yourself that this is authentic, that this is correct. Sure, over time you would know that there are some media houses that can be trusted and others less so. So I'm not saying that you have to subject each and every story to a check or be skeptical about everything you read. But over time, I think you need to develop primary and secondary filters. The primary filter is, of course, to decide, okay, which media houses are more reliable than the others. And the second is, even when it comes to your favorite media platforms, if there's something that is very strong and sensational, then you should at least satisfy yourself that the story is adequately sourced, that the information on which the story is based is plausible and confirmed and can be cross-checked or verified in some way. Now, that may not be possible each time. Many exclusives, for example, come in the form of leaks, documents that are leaked, or information that a privileged source gives, and there you have to then go along with the credibility of the journalist, the credibility of the media platform, and also look for corroborating information. But I would say that it's essential that young people as readers of news have their antenna up all the time and develop some sense of filtration so that you can put news that you read in the proper perspective each time.
Okay. And so, should Indians hope that the mainstream media would, suddenly correct itself and work as it should?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't catch the last thing you said, but I would say, should Indians hope that the mainstream media would correct itself? I would say that you should aspire for that. I think that as if you're a reader of a newspaper or if you watch a particular television channel, you should make your views known. If you find that these channels or these newspapers or websites are deviating from sound, objective journalistic principles, I think the era of the passive viewer and the passive reader is over. 20 years ago, as a reader of a newspaper, your only course of action, if you didn't like something, was to write a letter to the editor. Today, you can post your view on Twitter, you can post your view on Instagram or Facebook. And if you are making a valid point, chances are that others will pick up on it and it would be read and shared and reflected by thousands of more people. So don't underestimate the power of objective, well-mannered criticism. Don't be abusive. Don't be self-righteous, but be clinical, be objective, be factual, and demand that media be clinical, objective, and factual as well. And so don't be afraid to call out, wrong when you see it, even even if it comes from media platforms that you see and trust. And if enough people do that, then sure, it is possible that some section of mainstream media would then find it more and more difficult to deviate from the professional norms because they would then realize that there is a reputational cost and perhaps even a financial cost involved in making that deviation.
Thank you, sir. So I think we are done with the questions.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you so much, Mr. Siddharth Varadarajan, for taking your time out and enlightening us with the knowledge you have in the field of journalism. I would also like to thank PCGT and HR College for giving me this opportunity to host the webinar, which is much needed. I would like to thank Mr. Julio Ribeiro for being here with us and also my fellow friends for being patient enough. We shall circulate the feedback, the link to the feedback form, filling which the e-certificates will be mailed to you. So yeah, I think we are
Thank
done
you.
with the webinar.
Raj, just let me end like this.
Yeah.
So it is as Siddharth said very clearly, it's very much important to know these sutras which are there, because all the news comes from sutro ke hawale se. So it's very much important to realize that from where the news has come from, and we all as young citizens of the country should take care, should analyze and should question, start questioning, because life is asking the right questions. So start questioning and we start analyzing. And as I rightly said, whether it's coming from favorite media channel or from the trusted one, we start questioning. And I think we also will play our role in the democracy along with the journalism. So thank you once again, sir. Thank you once again for enlightening us, directing us to see in the right direction, and also telling us that yes, we have to start now questioning and questioning for our good only. Thank you so much on behalf of HR College, on behalf of HSC University, and on behalf of HSC Board. I once again thank you for all the valuable time you've given us and all the valuable knowledge you've given us. Thank you once again, Julius sir. Thank you once again, Ren sir, for having this opportunity given to the HR and SS team. And we're always glad to looking forward for hosting such more valuable sessions for our students and students across Mumbai University. Thank you so much once again. We at NSS signing off. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
The participants, the link to the feedback form will be circulated in the groups created on WhatsApp. So please fill it. Thank you.
So you can end the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining in.